Welcome back to the Infinite Jungle. We have another MEV-focused, MEV special edition episode with our two favorite MEV experts, Robert Miller, product lead at Flashbots. Hi, Robert.
Hi, thanks for having me back on.
Love it.
I'm in a jungle theme today.
Thank you. Thank you for going with the theme. As am I also, kind of a little floral print.
I rugged.
No. That's okay. That's okay. Lily, our favorite Rust engineer at Astria Labs. Hello. Thank you guys so much for coming back. Some exciting developments in the MEV space we're going to get into, namely the introduction of BuilderNet.
BuilderNet.
Dun, dun, dun.
Do you all like the name?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the most tepid response of all time. Like, do you like the name? Yeah. It's okay.
I feel like I don't even care about the name. I just want to get into what it does because it's so, the vision for it is decentralizing the builder market, which since the merge, centralization of builders have been such a huge, huge problem.
Yeah, of course. I asked because we went back and forth about various different names, and BuilderNet was sort of the best that we could come up with, and I think it is cute in its own ways.
Wait, what was the runner-up?
Co-Builder was the runner-up.
Ooh, no.
No. Okay. Thank goodness y'all went with BuilderNet.
Well, Co-Builder is cute because you can play with it in many different ways. Community builder, collaborative builder, co-processing, cooperative. Someone pointed out to me communist builder at one point. Maybe not that one necessarily, but there's a lot you can do with something. And so I thought that was interesting, and it sort of points to a bunch of things that you might do in the future. But BuilderNet ended up winning out.
BuilderNet sounds catchier. I think it rolls off the tongue a little bit better.
Okay, good.
Before we get started with the show, for our listeners, here is a quick show disclaimer. I need to remind you to please refer to the disclaimer linked in the podcast show notes and note that none of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice, an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Galaxy Digital or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Let's get started with how BuilderNet works. One of the key parts of BuilderNet is that these builders will get to share private order flow. Mm-hmm. That private order flow is not something that one builder builds up and then gets all of the benefits from, and it's like that self-fulfilling prophecy. Beaver and Titan have the best order flow, so they are the biggest builders. Mm-hmm. Is the success, so based on that rationale, is the success of BuilderNet and the way that BuilderNet works is BuilderNet will eventually have the most valuable private order flow, like all of the private, that private order flow is more lucrative or / competitive than the private order flow than the order flow going to Titan or Beaver?
In some ways, you're also just asking the question of how does it compete in the MEV-Boost auction, and the answer has to be that its blocks more valuable than other builders' blocks in order to compete in the MEV-Boost auction. And there's a few ways that we think that will be the case. The first is private order flow, of course, and we think it's really interesting because we have this open, permissionless mechanism that allows people to internalize the value of their flow. Because when the BuilderNet, any of the BuilderNet node operators win a block, the value that they're able to make on that block in the MEV-Boost auction gets refunded back to people who've contributed value in the blocks. So the sort of catchphrase for this is we're upgrading Ethereum's gas market to be second price. So if you send your order flow to BuilderNet and you overpaid, we will refund you up to the fair amount that you should have paid to get it included in a block. And we think that's really compelling for order flow providers, and in particular stands in contrast to the opaque deals that are going on with builders behind closed doors. The second thing, which isn't immediately the case on launch in BuilderNet, but is a part of the long-term vision, is that by putting this order flow in TEEs, we are able to open up that order flow for permissionless innovation, both on how do you find the most valuable blocks possible, but allowing people that otherwise don't have access to this order flow to collaborate on it to give users better trades to extract more of the value that is left over in the block right now. And that's going to lead to better outcomes both for users and for blocks in the MEV-Boost auction. So really turning order flow into this commodity and opening up permissionless competition and innovation on top of it that is going to generate more utility and value for users and validators.
That second part is super exciting. But the first part, I mean, doesn't that exist with MEV Share? I mean, already there is ways for users to, take part in getting some of their kickbacks. But in terms of the adoption of having users share that kind of valuable information, there hasn't been a ton of I guess, the private order flow coming from like DEX aggregators have those exclusive deals have still been, I feel like, outperforming. Users have not really, that wave of adoption hasn't really come. Are you foreseeing kind of like challenges and struggles with getting that order flow through BuilderNet in the early months?
In retrospect, I think MEV Share solved an important problem but didn't go far enough. And so MEV Share is able to give you refunds on the MEV that you generate. So if your transaction leaves an ARB on the table, you can get refunds for that, up to 90% of the value of the how much payments is made to a builder, but just on the portion of MEV that is being generated, so like arbitrage profits. And the challenge is that oftentimes people want to internalize their priority or gas fees in addition to MEV fees. So if you're a Telegram bot user and you're trying to be the first to snipe in a block, you will oftentimes just yeet huge amounts of priority fees, ridiculous amounts of priority fees. And mechanisms like MEV Share don't allow you to internalize that. You need something else to address sort of the overpayment or the refunds for overpayment to get included in a block. And that's where our refund rule comes into play and is able to address a much larger market segment of gas fee refunds instead of just MEV refunds. And it's a lot more attractive to people like the DEX aggregators, as an example, or the average wallet that they don't know all that much about MEV. They're using a DEX aggregator, so they're not leaving all that much on the table, but their users, have a hard time pricing their priority fees because gas markets are very hard, and they end up overpaying. And so this gives them an easy way to internalize the value of their flow up to sort of the second price, if that makes sense. And it addresses a different problem than MEV Share too.
I was kind of curious on like how the refund rule works in terms of like the operators who are like running the network. Do they get a cut of the extra block value, or does all of that go back to, I guess, the refund rule?
So that is one of the very important questions that we wanted to set the economics of the system alongside the operators. So I can tell you sort of what my perspective on it is, and then we're working through this with what the economics should be with the other operators instead of making unilateral decisions, is that we want to provide some sort of economic sustainability for node operators, and so they need some fee. It's probably going to be some percentage of transaction fees of the blocks that BuilderNet is able to include, probably a low one with most of the value going back to order flow providers, because that's also what is necessary in order to bootstrap this system. So the majority of value should go back to order flow providers, not the least because they're generating this value, and with some fee going back to node operators to keep them sustainable. I don't think it should be a hugely lucrative thing, though. In my vision, this is more like a Lido node operator being paid 5% rather than the core business that you have, if that makes sense.
Do you see like a limited number of operators going forward, or like how do you envision like the BuilderNet, I guess, like network looking like?
And the first principles here is that you want as many parties involved in block production as possible, and for two reasons. One is that is going to lead to more profitable blocks. Because you can aggregate many different preferences, because people have different specializations, they can find different MEV, they're in different geographies. And so ultimately, having more people involved in the process of building a block will build better blocks deliver more value to users, more value to validators. And so from that sense, you want the validator set to be very diverse. Second reason why you want a lot of operators and a lot of diverse operators is for censorship resistance, where different people have different compliance policies. You may be willing to process a transaction that doesn't make sense in my jurisdiction. And so by having as many operators in many places with as diverse preferences and compliance as possible, you get censorship resistance in the aggregate. And so we're starting out with 3 because we're trying to responsibly grow this system. They're different people. They operate in different places all around the world. My hope is that we onboard the next wave of folks in the first quarter of the year. It's probably not going to be up to 20, probably going to be something like 5 to 10 of us. And by the end of the year, it's a much larger network than the initial 3. Does that make sense?
It does. Or I think it's super cool that I feel like BuilderNet is like lowering the barrier for people to like enter this ecosystem because like I guess like people don't have to now source their own like private order flow.
Yeah, exactly. You shouldn't have to spend millions of dollars in subsidies to get on the RelayScan leaderboard and then go and form a relationship with wallet teams to get their flow in order to compete. Ideally, anyone in the world should be able to SSH into a box, deploy their code, and start collaborating and extracting MEV and giving users better trades. And that's the ultimate vision for BuilderNet, permissionless innovation on top of order flow.
But for the 2 builders that did do that effort of going to source their deals and are the best in the game at doing that, it was surprising to me that one of them would actively just kind of like leave that advantage on the table and join BuilderNet. Like that was so surprising to me of why Beaver would do that, especially given that they would have to share in the MEV revenue, right? Like they're giving some amount of it back to users. You guys are still negotiating how much to do that like long term going forward. But they wouldn't even have to engage in that negotiation at all because they are one of the best and they do, and that is like a large barrier to entry that would prevent other competitors from getting in. Like I was kind of confused about the rationale there from Beaver. How did you guys like convince whoever they are to do that?
Well, the first thing to note is that I think that business is probably less lucrative than you think. Because the order flow providers are in such a strong position within the supply chain that they can argue for very high refund percentages. And so a bunch of the deals out there, the sort of consensus belief is that they're paying back 90 to 95% of the order flow value. And the numbers that you see on RelayScan, which we should really disclaim more heavily since we operate RelayScan. Numbers that you see on RelayScan as a first approximation are not at all what the profits of these builders are like. So first order is that I'm not sure it's as good of a business as you think it is. Second order is that the Beaverbuild folks are searchers at heart. They were searchers before they ran Beaverbuild, and they were very good at that game. And we want to enable them to get back to searching. So there were a few reasons why they initially operated a builder. One of them is that they had all this order flow, and by running a builder, they were able to internalize the value of that flow by bidding strategically in the MEV-Boost auction. So you run a builder, you send your order flow to that builder, and then you use the fees from your order flow to win the auction, but you minimize how much you're paying by only paying more than the next builder. And that's a lot of money for them because of how much order flow that they have as a searcher. And so it's really appealing to them that we have this refund rule that is able to give them the fair value on their order flow with refunds. And instead of playing all of these negative sum order flow BD games, they can get back to searching and focus on really what brought them into the space in the first place and what they are best at, and playing long-term positive sum games, which was also a very big draw for them too. Doing the right thing for Ethereum, and even if that means issuing some amount of the order flow revenue that they have right now, they think that it is long-term the best thing for the ecosystem, and are happy to play those positive sum games instead of us quibbling over who gets this flow or who gets that flow. Does that make sense? So it's a combination of the removing the incentive as a searcher to vertically integrate as a builder, because we have this refund rule and a very fair market to transact on, as well as them being willing to play long-term positive-sum games.
That last rationale, I think, was very well articulated on X and, blog posts and whatnot. But I didn't quite believe it, I was like, there's got to be some other things at play here. But I think your answer does encapsulate those other reasons, too.
You should get them on the pod.
Yeah, possibly. But yes,
Can you say more about the relationship of operators to each other? You mentioned that they are collaborative instead of competitive, but I was just wondering what that looks like in practice.
In practice, they're all sort of running the same block building code right now. So there's very little room for differentiation at the launch initially. So we run the same block building code as the Nethermind team does, as the Beaverbuild team does, and all of our node instances are sharing order flow amongst each other. And then since it's all one part of a decentralized block building network, they're also not bidding against each other in the MEV-Boost auction. And that's really what the collaboration looks like at launch. In theory, as BuilderNet, or not in theory, the goal is as BuilderNet iterates along its roadmap, then there will be more space for differentiation in ways that are productive for order flow providers and for validators. E.g., you should have some sort of specialization where maybe the Nethermind team can upload a private merging model that they've innovated on, or the Beaverbuild folks have some special order flow feature that gives better execution for traders or something like that. Those are the types of ways that we want people to be able to differentiate and collaborate on the future. But at launch, it's a fairly straightforward model of just sharing order flow amongst each other and not competing in the MEV-Boost auction.
Would some of these feature innovations have to be public? I'm just confused on if someone has a new algorithm that makes more money, how do you ensure that's not running sandwiches? Look, our block is so much more valuable because we're extracting so much more somehow.
Yes, that is one of the really challenging problems with enabling private code to be deployed within this system. How do you make sure that users are actually getting their their MEV share refunds or MEV blocker refunds, whatever? And how are they not being sandwiched? And that's one of the open questions that needs to be addressed before we can really enable, truly permissionless innovation on things like bundle merging. There are a bunch of ways that you could try to approximate it. So maybe there's some sort of function that looks at all of the private outputs and gives the user or dedupes, and so only the bundle that is output that gives the user the best trade, as an example, is forwarded on. But the more you do stuff like that and try to constrain what these private merging algorithms can do, the more you're sort of stipulating up front what the merging algorithm must be and restricting the room for innovation. And so how you enable the private code that can innovate on stuff like bundle merging is one of the big open questions.
It might be fun to have scoring algorithms for some notion of user welfare to apply to these different algorithms.
Yeah, that's interesting. Public dashboard. This person, sandwiches you more than often, so you're not going to give permission for your order flow to be used there. This person seems to not sandwich. That can also work. Problem with that is then you might end up that's sort of social reputation in some way, and you fall back to no longer the barriers to entry are higher in that case too.
Baby steps, though, right? Baby steps.
Baby steps.
Could be a good first step.
Yeah. On some level, also, if you're refunding most of the value of this back to the user, does it really matter if they get sandwiched? There is some inefficiency loss there, just by the nature of the sandwich versus the back run. But maybe the best that we can do is actually enable permissionless innovation and pay all the value back to the user, even if it is a sandwich. If you really want to make a permissionless system.
On the topic of those dashboards, though, I was curious to know to what extent is the transparency of block creation and the value of the blocks obfuscated from using these Ts in BuilderNet? Is there any kind of loss in the transparency of this MEV supply chain with BuilderNet compared to just MEV-Boost with Beaver and Titan doing their own thing and these other builders just operating on their own?
So the first order thing here is that operators can't see private information while they're building blocks. And that is what enables us to have multiple different people that are operating this stuff. Why we can share order flow with everybody else, because you can be sure that the Nethermind team can't see it and front run it, or the Beaverbuild team can't see it and front run it. And eventually, that is the core reason why we can make the system permissionless too, since you do have some guarantee of privacy. And beyond that, in principle, I think your question is more like about data and insight into value and things like that. And in principle, there's no reason why it is worse than existing centralized builders. And in fact, I would even make the argument that it is better, because you can actually verify the rules that are processing your order flow. You can make strong assertions over who has access to your order flow, under what conditions, and what they're doing with it. And that's a level of transparency that doesn't exist today. You send your order flow to one of the big builders, you have no idea what relationships they have going on. You have no idea how they process it. You have no idea who gets access to that. Probably don't know what relays they're sending to, all of that stuff. But with BuilderNet, you actually have a verifiable guarantee over how your order flow is processed. And I think that unprecedented level of transparency is very cool. Yeah.
Have you guys noticed like differences in block values from the 3 different like operators today?
Yes. So we have. There are the Nethermind team and the Beaverbuild team have different compliance policies than us, and so they include some transactions that we don't. And so the Flashbots operator has been disadvantaged relative to the 2 of those.
This goes back to, I think, one of the questions that when we were prepping for this episode, you were talking about kind of the compliance and the censorship resistance of that BuilderNet would be able to provide, because these other builders might censor certain transactions, but other builders in BuilderNet may not.
Oh yeah, I was just wondering on like how much wiggle room an operator has to run like different code, including the different like block building algorithms. Or just I was wondering if like games would pop up of like operators trying to censor each other's like addresses or transactions, just to like give an edge to their own block or to their own order flow somehow.
So today that's not the case, especially because the economics that we think of this system is just if you're an operator, you get a percentage of the overall value, and instead of sort of trying to compete to produce more blocks or something like that. And there's relatively little room for differentiation between operators, kind of by design initially. The only thing that you can change, which is different across operators, is what your compliance policy is. And so, Flashbots is a US-based company. Everybody knows that we have a compliance policy, which has at times been controversial, et cetera, et cetera. Other people don't have those constraints for a variety of reasons, and they're able to offer different compliance policies and build different blocks with transactions that we can't. And so that is one dimension of differentiation. And that also makes the system more censorship resistant at the end of the day, because there are a diversity of different people who are willing to include a diversity of different transactions because they operate in different places with different compliance policies than we do.
And to confirm, not only can you kind of see that differentiation in terms of compliance, but you could also technically see that in terms of the differentiation between like fair ordering practices too, correct? Like one could do, say, like priority fee, or one could do first come, first serve. Like that would also be part of the transparency, correct? Or no?
Question mark. I don't know where you got that from. So initially, they're all running the same block building algorithms. It's open source code, Flashbot, github.com/flashbot/rbuilder. You can see all the building algorithms.
Okay.
And we want to let people permissionlessly innovate on top of order flow. So I guess in principle, if you deployed a bundle merging algorithm that was just merge everything, first come, first serve, and that one out, then that is definitely possible. Yeah. I'm not sure it would win. Relative to other things,
that was one of my questions too.
Okay, but so there is an underlying, the one that's open source, is that one that, so it, for the basis says like no sandwiching, like priority fee. I mean, those rules are built in, and then on top of that, you could put in your own flavor?
Yeah, so it's a vanilla block builder. It tries to build the maximally profitable block to begin with, and there's sort of no differentiation at launch on top of that. We want to start allowing people to join the network and to innovate on things that are productive, again, like bundle merging. But that's a future release. So today, everybody just runs the same block building algorithms, and they're vanilla in the way that you would expect. It's trying to maximize the value of the block.
Would users like one day choose like what algorithms they want their like order flow to be like included in? Is that a way that like different, I guess, like algorithms could compete with the different like fairness properties?
Yeah, I think you should be able to do that. I think it's somewhat of a tension between maximizing permissionless innovation and giving users choice to opt in to something. So on one level, you may just want everyone's order flow to be available to any program. On the other level, you may want users to be able to opt in to sharing more information or their order flow being processed in a different way with certain programs. And these things are kind of a tension. I don't have a great answer for you on where we'll end up in the spectrum. But we're trying to figure that out right now. Yeah.
Because this comes back to application-specific sequencing, right? of applications kind of having more control over their order flow and people to express their preferences.
Yeah.
A little bit of a quick side note. Were there any updates on your EIP, the application-specific sequencing one?
Not yet.
Okay.
I've started to explore like different directions of different ways to like, I guess like build blocks from like transactions being to specify like a relative ordering preference to each other. So I'm still researching it, but like maybe a slightly different direction.
Okay.
After getting feedback from the community of like, why this way?
I hope to hear you one day on one of the ACD calls presenting this EIP. That would be cool. Okay, let's.
You could have the builder just manage a piece of state. And so you could have a piece of state, Uniswap v4 pool as an example, that the builder needs to provide a signature to in order to update or something like that. That's definitely very possible.
I so dislike that though, because I feel like that's very like registration based or like deal with the builder almost. So it's not like super like it's permission instead of like unpermissions to like rely on like a certain builder to like behave a certain way.
Oh yeah, but with BuilderNet you can have a network, an actual decentralized network, perform that on your behalf instead of like going and striking a deal with Titan or something like that.
Would you just like strike deals with the individual like operators then?
Make a PR to the RBuilder code base is like the practical way that this would happen, and the BuilderNet operators and governance process will decide whether to upstream it or not.
Yeah, for composability, I feel like that gets messy because like if a ton of like different like applications are trying to like compose their different like sequencing rules, you get these really like messy, weird like dependency graphs that are hard to like write into code or write down.
Oh yeah, but you're the application-specific sequencing person, not me.
I know.
What is the governance of the BuilderNet going to look like moving forward? I mean, the BuilderNet is so nascent,
yes.
And there's so much that even through our conversation we were talking about we can look forward to. Let's talk a little bit about, timeline, next steps for this. The management of BuilderNet. I know this is a Flashbot spearheaded project, but like many of your most infamous like Flashbots created things, it ends up being like a community open source, very much Flashbots hands off at some point or another. I mean, you guys barely touch MEV-Boost now. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, I remember I talked to one of your team members about like, why does Flashbots not care about MEV-Boost anymore?
Well, I mean, we do. It's just MEV-Boost and software that touches the proposer is probably not something you should be changing all that much.
100%. And
so it's a feature, not a bug, that it's had minimal changes for the last 2 years, essentially. And a little bit of a digression, but that's probably going to be changing soon with all the stuff that people are doing with pre-comps, and we're working through that. Hey, your clock just changed to 6 figures, Bitcoin 100K.
Oh my gosh!
In the corner. Another diversion from your actual question, but that was cool to see in real time.
That was very cool to see. We were just talking about this right before the show. I guess they just replaced the $sign with the 1.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
They built it in.
They
I wonder
really
if the last
thought about
one
it in
flips
advance. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I was complaining that this block clock, which I don't know that you all will have access to on the video.
You can see it on Galaxy Brains podcast. Shout out to the other podcast that happens for Galaxy.
It didn't have enough digits for Bitcoin 100K, and they just did away with the $sign. So it does have it now.
That really is impressive. They really they thought about that in advance.
Yeah.
They were bullish.
Bitcoiners.
So what are the next steps for BuilderNet? One thing that I think I'll throw out, which is adjacent to what your question is, but related to the previous conversation, is that we have this really interesting work with the rsync team on how do you give searchers access to the to builders' blocks in a way that can be permissionless and safe for users so that they don't get front run. So the work that we've done is that the rsync team will stream the state of their blocks into a TEE, where then searchers can deploy their code inside of the TEE and have access to that state to be able to back run the bottom of the block and clean up a bunch of MEV that is left over. And that's really cool because the bottom of the block, our market right now, is super gated by personal relationships. Builders are sort of trusting these searchers not to front run their blocks. And so only a handful of people, you could count on one hand probably the number of people in the world that have access to these relationships. But we can turn that into a permissionless market because now anyone can deploy their code and get access to builder's state inside of this TEE. And so it's sort of classic Flashbots work, I think, of taking this closed, opaque system and opening it up by using a TEE. And if you squint, you can see how we can use this kind of private code primitive in order to move from a world where you have big monolithic builders that are all doing the same thing, they're building all the blocks themselves in BuilderNet, to incrementally outsourcing the building of blocks more and more to searchers that are running in a TEE or other block builders, and move from this world where you have these monolithic builders, albeit in a network, BuilderNet, into an actual distributed process where many different people are building parts of a block. So I didn't get to do the full diatribe on that before, but that's one of the big next steps that we are excited about. First, enabling that for BuilderNet so people can permissionlessly back run the bottom of our blocks, and then second, building on top of that to move from kind of a monolithic block builder to one that is more decomposed and more distributed across many different searchers. So that's one of the big next steps. The other next steps for us is that we want to onboard more operators. 3 is better than 1, certainly. We actually just shut down our centralized block builder yesterday before this call. The news isn't even on Twitter, but you can see it on chain, I suppose. So we no longer operate a centralized block builder. We only operate a BuilderNet node now, which is really cool, making good on our promises to decentralize, finally. And we want to open that up so it's not just the 3 of us, but it is many, many, many more operators. We're going to be onboarding more people in the first quarter of the year. There are some centralized training wheels as a part of BuilderNet too. There's like some parts of identity that need to be managed, how refunds are processed. We want to incrementally decentralize those things also, because although they're not a part of processing the sort of how the block is built, they are a point of centralization, and we want to remove that. And we're going to figure out the kind of economics and decision-making of this system alongside the community and our operators in the coming months. So I don't have concrete plans to be able to tell you that, because it's something that we wanted to be a process with buy-in from our operators and the community, as opposed to something that is being imposed.
That governance part, I think, is going to be very challenging because there's so much more value capture in participating in that governance and making certain decisions sway more to a particular entity or party than others. Then perhaps, before then in the systems that you guys have introduced before, I feel like that's new territory for you guys to create a governance model for it that could be like long-lasting, sustainable. It's like an open question, I feel like, for so many protocols, you know?
Well, if you go back in 2021, I wrote this piece along with a bunch of other people at Flashbots. It was around the time of EIP 1559, and there were a bunch of people who were trying to do things with MEV at the time that were less resistant to capture, let's say, than Flashbots was. And we outlined what are the principles of MEV marketplaces that you want. One of them is permissionless, one of them is privacy, the third one is capture resistant. And so we've been thinking about this a long time of how do you design an MEV marketplace that is really capture resistant. And I actually think that we do have some track record with governance in a way that has not been captured, at least I think, in the form of MEV-Boost. You're sitting here making jokes that we're not doing anything with it, but maybe that's a feature, not a bug.
I mean, in terms of being able to, if you could change the order flow, I guess like that is captured by the builder versus the user, if that was like an aspect that is subject to governance, or if with the addition of more searchers, or like being able to make more the bottom of the block available to more searchers, maybe there are more parameters, I guess, to play around with. And if that's controlled by governance, then I can see how with MEV-Boost, there's not as many, I guess, parameters that people would be able to care about.
It's very little. I mean, proposers just get blocks.
That's really it.
But there's a lot they can do with that, right? And so there's a lot of people who have wanted to use proposers for a lot of things, and it's certainly also a very privileged piece of software in and of itself. It's just it is designed in a way to be very minimal. Although you could certainly make PRs into it that would make it much less minimal. And we're bringing that philosophy also to governance within BuilderNet. Ideally, there is as few knobs as possible that can be tweaked. And ideally, we can learn from a lot of the other governance work that has been done over the last few years. I take inspiration from Lido as an example of trying to minimize the power that they have, trying to give really interesting knobs for the community to turn in case Lido is doing something that is not perceived to be positive for the community. And so I'm pretty optimistic that we will figure something out that is positive, and maybe you'll even be impressed by.
I'm just saying, I'm skeptical, okay? It's very hard. This is a very hard problem. And I think with BuilderNet, the long-term sustainability of BuilderNet depends on those knobs existing and a robust governance system around it. I think Lido is actually a really great example of like one of those teams, I feel like, in the ecosystem where that is probably like one of their biggest, I guess, challenges. Did you have any thoughts on that to add, Lily?
Not on governance. That's out of my wheelhouse.
No.
Yeah.
Like, I guess there's like literature on like how like L2s like have to manage their own governance as well, just because they can get captured, or if like more people like control like the governance of the L2, they can like control the funds on the L2.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a problem that has like other similarities to like other groups.
Yeah. In terms of the timeline for Flashbots and others, in terms of the timeline for BuilderNet to get to a stage where those centralized kind of dependencies of identity verification or whatnot, to really get to a stage where it's hands-off, operating more or less autonomously, like how far out do you think we are from that stage for BuilderNet?
The different pieces will come at different times. And so by identity, I meant that node operators need some way to discover each other's identities. I am a BuilderNet node operator, verify sort of what the public key associated with that is, and their Coinbase address, and all these different things to manage a bunch of different aspects of the system. And so that's what we mean by identity management. You said identity verification. I was like, oh no, that's like probably going to give people the wrong impression.
No, that's good clarification. But you also mentioned, like the verification for the MEV share, or the kickbacks to users. There are certain dependencies that need to be taken off. I mean, yeah. Yeah,
so in order to give refunds to users, you need to have a record of what order flow was seen at the time that you built a block, basically, to give people the sort of fair value. So you got to compare, this person was included on chain, they paid 101 ETH, and this other person was conflicting with them. They paid the next most at 100, but the first trade landed instead of they did, and obviated or conflicted with the second trade. And so the fair sort of price of the first trade shouldn't be 101, it should be 100, paying the second price. So for that, you need a record of everything that you had seen during block building time, and when you had seen it also, because latency really matters here. So in BuilderNet, there's this archive that we operate, the order flow archive, and its whole purpose for us is observability in the system in case something goes wrong, and then how to process refunds. And in the immediate term, the goal is sort of to spec out really robust designs for decentralizing this and then grow the adoption of BuilderNet. And we don't have a timeline for when all these centralized dependencies are going to be removed just yet. Should my goal is that Flashbots is not in a position of privilege by the end of 2025.
There we have it. End of 2025.
I would like us to not operate centralized infrastructure at the end of 2025.
Amazing.
We will hold you to that.
That is the goal.
I had a question on if there's any barriers to using BuilderNet with Rollup-Boost, because I saw mentions of like those two working together.
Yeah, so that'll be one of the cool things that we hope to offer as a feature is BuilderNet will be this kind of globally distributed network of operators that are building blocks. Why not just outsource your rollup sequencer to this network as well? And so that's the obvious BuilderNet Rollup-Boost connection there is that L2 sequencers will be able to have out of the box a high performance, globally distributed, highly available sequencer that they can outsource their sequencer to, including with features like flash blocks on top of.
So there's no barriers. That just like is something that can be done. Like
Yeah. I mean, the software needs to be written, and that's the barrier. But other than that, that's definitely something that can be done, and something that we want to do.
That's exciting for the L2 landscape.
Yeah, I think hopefully at the end of 2025, we have actually meaningfully decentralized a lot of these sequencers, which I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah. Fascinating. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Robert, Lily, for this amazing conversation on BuilderNet. I feel like I understand it better now.
Me too.
I hope so. Thanks for having me on, and thank you for the great questions.
And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to another episode of The Infinite Jungle. We are all signing off from the concrete jungle that is New York City in your explorations of the infinite jungle that is Ethereum. Stay safe out there.